Well, welcome back. This is one of our final weeks actually, because a couple weeks we're going to have your group projects ready that you're going to have to go through and watch, and then our final exam. So I think I need to go back and check, but I think we only have one more lecture after this. So pretty crazy that it's coming to an end like this, and I've enjoyed getting to know you all. You've been such an amazing class. So thank you for your hard work. And I know that sometimes it feels like a lot because you have so many classes, but I really truly think that you're getting so much information that you're going to be able to use for your classroom. And I'm excited to see you all as teachers because I have really enjoyed seeing your work. So today is another huge topic. So I know we've already talked about the behavior management side and learning about all different aspects of special education, strategies, really just being a good teacher. That's what it's all about. So today is no different. This is a super, super important topic that we're going to talk about. And this is about you learning to implement your instruction in the best way possible to meet your students. So keep in mind too, as a co-teacher, we are technically teaching all students. A special ed teacher will teach both gen ed and special ed, though they have their own special ed caseload. And a general ed teacher is going to teach students with and without disabilities. So this is important for all of us. And let's take a look here. I'm going to do kind of a hybrid with your reading guide like I normally do, a little bit from the textbook, a little bit from this lecture. So just be prepared. It's coming from both places as usual. So this is a little bit of a flash from the past here. We talked about UDL towards the beginning. And like I mentioned way back then, I said, here's an overview, but we are going to talk about this more specifically towards the end of the semester. So here we are. It's time to talk about it. And if you remember back, think about this, and this is something that'll be very important for your final as well, so keep this in mind. But this whole multiple means of, we have engagement, representation, and then expression as well. So remember, the engagement is the why of learning, the representation is the what of learning, and the expression is the how. So even science tells us that each one of these different aspects hits different parts of the brain. So when you use all three of these different types of learning, you're actually engaging your student's entire brain, which is what we want to do. So it's very, very important what it is. So just as a little reminder, I'm only going to play half of this video, and it's only 3 minutes long, the part that I'm going to play. So just take a look at this. He's talking about these three different forms because it can be a little bit ambiguous to us still. And then I'm going to give you another awesome resource that, once again, you're going to have so many of these items to put in your future teacher folder. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. So I gotta unplug my headphones. Let's see this little transition. Let me, I'm gonna have to get it started and then switch over on the screen. So just give me a second for that. I gotta love Zoom, right? All right. So, all right, let me switch on over here to this other screen. All right, there we go. So I'm going to start it right around there, actually. Let's see.
In many classrooms, the focus is on an illusory average student. Many curricula are designed for that student. Cognitive neuroscience has shown us that there really isn't an average student anywhere, and that's why it's an illusory student. Universal Design for Learning, though, is particularly focused on making sure that we get those students who have been marginalized, for whom that designing for the average student has never worked well.
So I'm pausing it there for a second just to say, because I'm about to skip forward, I want you to hear that part just because we think about the average student as probably your textbook student, the one who just loves learning. They can read it from a textbook, they take tests really well, they get these concepts, But even think about yourself or people you know, or maybe family members. You pretty well know that that's only a percentage of the population that really excels that way. So we think about all the other students and how do we reach them. So I'm going to fast forward. I'm going to make sure I try and get close to the point where I want to be. So let's see if this is it.
The three principles of universal design for learning come from careful analysis of what learning really is, and particularly the research that has been done by thousands of other researchers in cognitive science, cognitive neuroscience, neuropsychology, which have carefully looked at what comprises learning. How does learning really work? And what are its differences among individual learners? From that work, we've abstracted out three simple principles that are involved in any learning situation. How does the learner pick up information? How do they express and act on that information? And how are they engaged by the learning situation? There are three broad principles. The first has to do with how we present information to the learner. And we talk about multiple means of representation. As it turns out, there's no one way that we can present information so to be successful for everyone to learn it. So we talk about multiple means of representation. So in UDL, we talk about providing multiple representations so that we're sure everyone will be able to make sense of the symbols, the language, the drawings, and so on. Take, for example, in teaching mathematics, it's typically very strong to use multiple representations, not just the symbolic expression of the numbers, but manipulables, things that the children can operate on and see directly and perceptually rather than their symbolic form. So that's a great example of providing multiple representation, both the symbolic number and a physical manipulative. The second principle is provide multiple means of action and expression. And that takes into account the fact that students vary greatly in how they express what they know, how they can act skillfully, how they can communicate in language or in drawing and so on. And students differ widely, so we say we must provide multiple means of expression over the course of our teaching and learning. The third principle is multiple means of engagement. And in many ways, it's the most important principle. If we don't engage students in learning, don't make it important to them, make them motivated for it, then none of the other forms of representation and expression will be that important. Within Universal Design for Learning, when we look at a curriculum, we think of four main components, and each of them need to be universally designed. The first component is, what are its goals? How do we translate standards into things that are important to do in the classroom? Secondly, what are the materials that are going to be in that classroom? Everything from a chalkboard to a textbook to a workbook to something on the wall. Are these materials key to learning? And if so, are they universally designed for learning? Third, the methods. How does the teacher go about teaching when she or he is working at helping students learn? Does she set up collaborative groups? Does she lecture? Does she provide experiences out in the world? And lastly, and very important to Universal Design for Learning, is the means of assessment. How are we sure that learning really occurs? When we began our work, we, like most people, were focused on learners who were doing poorly, who looked like they had disabilities. Over time, we began to change our focus because we could see when we were in classrooms that the classrooms were in fact disabling, that they were not designed properly to ensure that every child would succeed. And we began more and more to see that the curriculum itself was disabled, and that the work of the Universal Design for Learning guidelines is to reduce the disabilities in the curriculum itself so that more students succeed, more students have optimum challenges, and come out as expert learners in the end.
Headphones back in, but I thought that was really good, just to give you a visual and hear it from somebody else, because it's kind of an abstract topic unless we really wire it down to something specific. So as you can tell, all three are very important, but I also agree with him on the fact that that one portion of the experience and being able to engage students is so critical, because if we can't engage them, then the rest can matter. But if they're not engaged in the work and they're not with you and they're not interested in it, chances are that they're remembering the materials and working with you on that is going to be a lot lower and more limited. So I wanted to show you this as well while I'm already on the internet share. So I have provided this for you within the week by week module. And I think this is, once again, one of those documents I really implore you to download it and save it into your future teacher folder, because this is everything. I mean, I think this is a wonderful document and it really breaks things down for you. So for each principle, so let's just start with means of representation here. It gives you little checkpoints. So as you're teaching, you're asking yourself, okay, am I doing this? Am I displaying information in a flexible format so that the following perceptual features can be varied? So then you can think about it and say, okay, do I have some different images, graphs, tables, either visual content, some videos? Do I have any of this in this lecture? So here's the thing, I want to be realistic too, because you know me, I try and give you as much application as possible. I try and give you the real scoop, because I can talk to you all day about all of these things you should do, but once you get into the classroom and it gets stressful and busy, a lot of these things go out the window. So try and just keep this printed, and even if you take this in your classroom and just set it on your desk, and literally as you're going through your lesson planning for the week, just kind of skim through this, because otherwise it's so easy, especially your first few years, to just go, okay, I'm going to go download this worksheet. Here's a piece of paper, everybody. Here's a pencil. Do your work. That's it. It's just easier. Some of you who are teaching with elementary obviously have a little bit of an easier time with that, because that's easier in elementary because you have so many fun things that you can do. Middle and high school, a lot of times resorts back to pencil and paper. So for the few of you who are going to be middle school or high school teachers, I really, really implore you to try and focus on this, because our students are students. Even if we had the option as adults, we would probably prefer most of the time to have some of these options given to us as well, right? So scroll through this every time. So if I could speak anymore, right? Alternatives for auditory information. So you could look through that. Alternatives for visual information. You've got, this one's one of my favorite, clarify vocabulary and symbols. I talk about this all the time. So before you all read a passage, for the readers who are struggling, are you going through key vocabulary words before you even start reading, so that the students are able to connect, right? That's a huge one. Clarify syntax and structure. Are you able to highlight some of the areas, make connections to things that they've previously learned? You can highlight transition words and essays, links between ideas in a concept map. So support decoding of text, mathematical notation and symbols, tons and tons of options here. I mean, this is endless. I'm not going to go through each and every one of them, but I really, really recommend that you go through this and print it, save it for yourself, put it in a virtual file, whatever you need to do. This is a good one too. It gives you one for pretty much math and literacy, comprehension. They talk about these KWL concept maps that are pretty popular, analogies and metaphors, highlighting patterns, critical features. So you get the point on that. Then it goes into multiple means of expression. And this will be very helpful for your exam as well, because if you need to think of different types of, the UDL principles of give me some examples for each one, you will very easily be able to find that if you print this, keep this document nearby, and I think it's going to be helpful for you. So multiple means of action and expression. So how do we get them engaged? And actually, this isn't the engagement one, but how do you express it in different ways that are just principles of paper, pencil worksheets? So provide options for physical action. It gives you a bunch of examples there. Access to tools and assistive technologies. We've talked about that. Multiple media for communication. So allowing them to maybe draw or design something, film it, dance, There's so many ways you can get the same point across. And we've talked about this several times as well. I'm a big proponent of this is student choice. And like I've said before, I mean, especially if you work with younger students, you don't want to say, okay, choose anything, but you have one main goal that you want to do. You give them maybe two options. You could either make a presentation, you can make a drama, you can do a comic book strip. I mean, as long as the content's getting done, who cares what format it's in, right? So you can have even a rubric for each one of those different representations, expressions of that project. And you could say, if you include this content, this content, this content, and this content inside whatever project mode you choose, you get the points, right? So that gives them something interesting and allows them to use their gifts and what they're good at. So keep that in mind too. It tells you how to build fluency, executive functioning, planning. This is a really good one with stop and think before acting. So especially when you have young students, we talked about before with Tyler, my brother, who had come with the mental health perspective. A lot of students cannot regulate because of things that have happened in their past. And so they just impulsively do things. And we're thinking, oh my gosh, you just hit that student, or you're just talking out impulsively. Maybe you could help students. This could, in some cases, apply to students with ADHD or EBD, emotional behavior disorder as well. So you could even have a prompt up, right? Stop and think, and that reminds them. And this is a principle that will help them through their whole lives, because if they can't regulate now as a child, what do you think when they're an adult and they have a choice to, it could get, I mean, I know I'm being dramatic right now, but I've worked with the students who were at risk, and the students who had a lot of legal issues, a lot of problems, because when they were younger, they never learned to stop and think and learn how to deal with impulsivity. Whereas now that they're 16, 17, 18 years old, in my classroom, when I was teaching back then, their ability to not stop and think, some stole cars, some were stealing from the grocery store and had to go to jail, or, you know, there's different things that you as a teacher, I want you to always remember this as an elementary teacher, and obviously I was middle and high, and some of you are too, but I want to hit on the fact that those of you who are elementary teachers, what you're teaching now is a principle that will grow. It's like a seed you're planting in them that can grow. So by the time they get to middle and high school, that's a principle that they should be able to keep, and it could save their lives. So I thought these were really good ones as well. Let's see, capacity for monitoring progress. Self-monitoring is a very well-known strategy for teaching, effective teaching. So this gives you some steps on that. And then finally, this document is extensive, but it's very, very helpful. Multiple means of engagement. How do you engage your students? My favorite, individual choice and autonomy. And let's see, optimize relevance, value, and authenticity. You want it to relate to them and be something that they're interested in. We talked several times about students with autism, right? So if you have a student in your class who has autism and they love maps, they love everything to do with, they can tell you what street to turn on, what street is coming up. I've had students who can tell you every street name within 50 miles. It's incredible what a lot of these students can do. So if that's that student's interest, why not incorporate that into a couple of the lessons? And you have another student who loves animals, is a huge animal advocate. Maybe incorporate that in one of your science classes, right? Do some things that are useful to them. Here's another just quick piece of strategy for you. I have noticed, and I need to do a better job of using this myself, but when you create your assignments, whether that's a worksheet or you're creating kind of a story that is explaining some of your content, try and use your students' names as often as possible within your worksheets or your lessons, because they see that and they get interested. They say, oh, they said my name in there, and use their names within an example. I do want to note though that if it's a bad situation, I'm trying to think of a good example for this. So if you are telling a story of what's wrong versus right, and you say, okay, this student, if you're telling a social story, for example, this student went into the classroom and walked appropriately and did the right thing, but there was a student named, and you use one of the students' names, who ran in the classroom and didn't do what they were supposed to do. So I would recommend using a non-student name when you're talking about something that they're doing wrong. Because as humans, what we do is we automatically think, oh, she really thinks that about me. Oh, did I do something wrong? Did I actually run in the classroom? So using student names in your worksheets, or a math problem, right? They say, was a word problem, because I'm lacking my examples right now. It's going to come to me, I promise. So if you had a word problem on your math worksheet, Jimmy went to the store and he bought 5 apples and 6 oranges, and he has this much money, and this is how much change he's going to get back. So you could use the students' names in that example, but if I'm going to be really dramatic again real quick. So if you're talking about something they're not supposed to do, the student stole a candy bar or did something wrong, and now he has to go back and pay the store manager back, don't use one of your students' names for that, okay? So that's a very extreme example, but I think you get the point on that. So here's another one: minimize threats and distraction, heighten goals and objectives. There's just a ton. I mean, this is endless. And the thing I know about classes and courses, I'm giving you like one of those fire hose of information, right? All of the information is just flowing out at you. So I'm trying to give you some things that you can pull back out later, because the chances of you remembering everything I say is good, but long term, I think for you to refer back to this is going to really help you, okay? So I hope that makes sense and gives you some good examples and good ideas of what each one of these principles mean and what you can actually tangibly do as a teacher to implement them, okay? Let's go back over to my PowerPoint. Give me just a second. All right, and I've got tons of examples today, so that's just one component. So hopefully you have a better grasp on UDL, how you can use this in your classroom, what each one means. If you're still a little on it, I would suggest going through that PDF and taking some more time and reading through it, because that's going to give you more information. All right, this is one of my favorite topics. I know I say that to everything because really everything is, but this is very much so what I wrote my dissertation on. I actually created an entire curriculum to help high school students to be prepared for the workplace. That's my passion. That's what I study and research, right? But to do that, I had to build a 100-page curriculum in a couple months, and it's a lot. But to build a curriculum, and even as a teacher, when you're creating your individual class curriculum, you have to know what makes a good instructional structure, right? You have to know that. So first thing I did want to notice that direct instruction has a ton of research behind it. So we talk a lot about letting students explore and do all these other things. That's good. I mean, those are things that you should do, letting them do projects and learn in all kinds of different ways, but they need some kind of direct instruction, at least in the beginning, right? So for example, if you're going to teach about punctuation to a group of students, have some kind of a presentation or a story that you teach through, or do something where you're actually teaching them directly, like kind of like we as professors have to do a lot of direct instruction. That's basically all that we do, right? I miss the component when I was in the classroom, and when I'm actually teaching you all in person as well, that we can do the rest. But keep this in mind for your classrooms. What you do with direct instruction or explicit instruction is very similar to the format that you just did last week for your, or maybe a week or two ago, for your lesson plans that you did for your accommodations, right? So you had an opener of some kind, which is good to just get their mind started. Always recommend, especially middle and high school, do that as soon as they step in the door. They have a routine. Always have some kind of a bell ringer or entrance slip that they fill out as soon as they walk in the door. Then you get right into the lesson after 5 minutes. I've seen so many times, and so many teachers either don't have one, so the students come in and just start talking and doing their thing, teachers checking attendance. That's a good 10 to 15 minutes wasted, right? And if you're teaching elementary with your transitions, this is a good principle too. So if you get things on a routine, like we talked about last week, you will have it like a machine. Students will be wasting a lot less time. You'll have a lot less behavior issues that you have to deal with. So you've got your opener, you give instruction, just like you talked about in your lesson, and then you do some guided practice, as you can see here, where you do it together and you make sure that you're modeling some things and checking and giving them feedback. And then after that, they get a chance to do independent practice, where that same principle, you give them another form of it, maybe another worksheet or another activity that's similar but different, and see how they do on their own. Then you give them a little mini assessment at the end. I like to do something quick, because as a teacher, you will learn, as I'm even experiencing right now and through my whole career, that grading is extensive. It's just like being in school yourself, right? You have to grade so many things. And if you have a class of 25 to 30 students, and if you're in middle and high school, you could have even up to 120 things per class that you have to grade each week. So you want to try and minimize as best as possible that pain and stress. So if you are afforded or allowed to have tablets in the classroom, I prefer to use those polls or something like Google Classroom or SurveyMonkey, and then just always have it available and up for them, that they can, at the end of that lesson, go there, take this quiz. And if it can score it automatically, that's better. Or if you have it in an electronic format, it's easier to grade. If you do little paper slips, that works too, but just be careful or have a very good organizational system, because what I've also seen with a lot of teachers is that these teachers have papers stacked up to Mount Rushmore, like to the top of Mount Rushmore. I mean, you come in and it's just a mess, right? So you have to have file folders and organization systems and a place where they can turn it in, so that once you grade it, you can put it into the graded pile, or the, I don't know if you can see this, kind of like, well, that's not helping at all, but one of those systems where it allows you to organize your work for you. Then just keep in mind too, this is the last step of the direct instruction principle, is making sure to also revisit it in the future. So weekly and monthly reviews. Cumulative assessments are proven to work way better in helping students remember things long term than if you just talk about it once and then they never talk about it again. It's over at that point. The chances of them retaining that knowledge is very, very low. So that is why even in this course, we talked about a few of the principles before I even taught the full extensive portion. And you will have a cumulative exam at the end, right? Because that's going to be the thing that helps you retain the information. Same for your classroom. If you teach about history and you talk about Abraham Lincoln, let's just say, and then you talk about a couple other presidents, and then you, in a couple months, you say, oh, okay, let's review. What trends did you see between those 4 or 5 presidents? So you're bringing it back to their memory. You're helping them come to mind. And then maybe the final exam talks about all of the presidents again, from the first 50 years of America, you know? So that is proven in the literature to be the case. And I know if you're anything like me, I thought that cumulative exams were just a cruel form of punishment. And I was thinking, why are you making me study like this? I don't get it. But it is proven in the literature that that is what helps you retain information, okay?